Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Comfy Bothered. I am joined by my bestie.
Hey, bestie. Feel so far away right now.
I know. Our hostess with the most is Abby. I'm Anna. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. We're coming at you with a bit of a deeper topic today. So put your boots on, strap them in. We're going to
Yeah.
be talking about some emotional shit.
Yeah.
Something that we had talked about personally when we were talking about the whole Scandival thing and when just talking about cheating that happens on the show. You and I had both watched Psychology in Seattle. So shout out to I think Dr. Honda, is that his name?
Yes, yeah.
And his episode talking about Vanderpump Rules and the whole cheating scandal, he always encouraged viewers to check in with their bodies and make sure that they're feeling okay having these conversations. So, for people listening who may have experiences with cheating or infidelity or just really any kind of betrayal, just encourage you guys to check in with yourself and yeah, just be mindful of how these kind of topics sit in with you because they can be anxiety provoking for sure.
Yeah. Thanks so much for saying that and kind of setting the stage that way because it's so true. Like it does have such a deep emotional impact, regardless of what your experiences have been. It's really scary to
Hmm.
imagine, going through something like that.
Hmm.
Um, Today I'm showing up quite literally in my pajamas because I just want to give comfy vibes and this topic definitely makes me want to just stay in bed and stay at home and never leave my house ever again. So that's the
Yeah,
vibe we're
it's
giving today.
so true. And part of what we're talking about today too is invested audiences. People have pretty intense reactions to stuff like this happening. And so I think it can be really difficult to sort of separate how we feel about something versus what other people might feel about it because we all bring our own take to this topic. So yeah, this is definitely a comfy conversation and not one that's going to be super one way or another. So I hope you guys enjoy it nonetheless. Um, I did want to address our backgrounds because I have quite the spotlight on me. Today I'm joining you from the Dancing with the Stars set. Now, it's not confirmed nor denied what's exactly happening between Mauricio and Kyle on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, but
You mean Emma? Oh
Mauricio,
yes, sorry.
that's okay. Mauricio has been killing it on the show, and there has been some rumors about
Rumors.
him and his co-star or his dance partner potentially having a little bit of a fling. So this is the background I'm bringing you today. As you guys know, who have been watching our podcast instead of listening, I'd like to do lots of sets and good entryways. So this one felt fitting.
I love it. I love with all the spotlight on you. It just is like perfectly capturing all of your beauty.
Oh, shucks.
But yeah, that was pretty spicy. I've never watched Dancing with the Stars before this most recent season. And I didn't know who Emma was or anything. But it was pretty clear that there was some chemistry. I was like, holy, okay, something's going on here. But in fairness to Emma, I did just watch the season before, and she does get really close with all of her partners, it seems. She's just like that type of affectionate person, but there's still a big question mark on it, so we'll see.
Definitely, yeah. And I feel like with dancing too, there would have to be some sort of a connection there, whether it's forced or natural. That makes
Yeah.
sense to me. But nevertheless, I think just in light of everything going on, it's looking
Yeah.
and it's been weird seeing him hold hands with somebody else at the very least. So
Yeah. 100%. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely not a couple that we would have pictured before this year
for sure.
doing that, but
Absolutely.
so not so much of a mystery is my background. We have Chris Bassett kind of peering over my shoulder.
As he does.
Yeah, he literally just can't be bothered in this photo. He's just like on his phone. He's rolling his eyes, probably like, here we go again. I'm at some other fucking event with these women. But there was a rumor that this woman, Deborah, on Real Housewives of Potomac, she was trying to stir the pot and say that one of the husbands, Chris, was flirting with her. So this is the actual screenshot of that moment. He's looking at his phone, he's looking around the room, he's clearly not bothered with her. And the caption that the production put is Chris not staring at Deborah. So there you have it, folks. There's the evidence.
So good, so funny. I just love Real Housewives editors. They do such a good job.
I know, particularly out of Potomac, they just seem to
Yeah.
have some real magic. I don't know if it's the same crew, but they're just, oh, they're so good.
Yeah. I think it must be a separate crew because we don't really see that in any other
Yeah,
series. So shout out to them.
I know. They give us some juice over there.
Need some juice. Yeah, so just to sort of give some context as to why we wanted to talk about this, there has been a lot, as we've sort of alluded to already, a lot of conversation in new episodes in recent seasons, sort of beyond Real Housewives, Vanderpump Rules as well, but lots of conversations around cheating and infidelity, and it is a theme that we see quite a bit, especially in Vanderpump Rules. It's sort of been the main driving force of that whole series is friends stabbing each other in the back and sleeping with each other's partners. More so in the earlier seasons than as of recently until season 10. And as we're approaching season 11 coming out end of January, which I'm really looking forward to.
Oh my God.
There's been just so much going on. So we have, the return, like I said, of Vanderpump Rules and dynamics between Tom and Ariana and how those are going to play out. I think Rachel's part of the show, at least for her first few episodes. I know that she ended up leaving, but she did
Oh,
record for a little bit and then ended up just backing out. So I don't know if that will even make it on air. I'd be curious to see that.
oh, I did not
Um,
know that.
yeah, yeah, or at least that was like rumored online, so we'll see what actually happens.
Ooh,
And like I had talked about in reference to my background, we have Kyle and Mauricio, who long-term marriage couple that are separating right now. I don't think they're fully divorced as of right now, although
mm.
Kyle's kind of slipped a few times saying,
A
my
little Freudian
divorce.
slip.
Yeah, so we're kind of like watching that unfold right now on the show. Potentially some cheating on either side. Again, we don't fully understand the whole full context, but it is sort of becoming more and more apparent as episodes come out that there is a bit of a connection between Kyle and a friend of hers, Morgan. And Kyle's been making some jokes about that. Finally, it's her. There's rumors about her cheating and not him anymore. And
Hmm.
like, it's just kind of been uncomfortable to watch, more or less. And something that we've seen and time again, this constant conversation about Juan Dixon cheating on Robin Dixon and Real Housewives of Potomac. It's just sort of like a constant story that, especially with him, is getting worse as the seasons progress. It's
Yeah,
been turning into legal problems, it's turning into allegations, it's turning into just a whole lot of messiness. And it's pretty uncomfortable to watch, both from Juan's part and Robin's, I would say personally. So that's been difficult to sort of navigate. So, anyways, needless to say, there's lots going on. Episodes are coming out weekly, lots of conversations about infidelity, and we've seen lots in the past, and we've seen a lot of audiences feel really strongly one way or another, really going to bat for people who have been cheated on or have been the one who've been cheating. And that's been sort of interesting. So we wanted to unpack that a little bit more. But Abby, are there any other examples about cheating that stick out in your mind when we think about it?
yeah. I mean, one of the big examples, I think one of the first times for me that I really saw it on reality TV was when Sheena came into the picture on VPR. It was the
Yeah.
whole situation with Brandy and her husband at the time, I guess.
Hmm.
And it's always interesting when shows overlap as
Yeah.
well with Real Housewives of Beverly Hills overlapping with Vanderpump Rules, everyone running in the same circles. Um, and I think when Brandy like came to the restaurant, was it Sir? I think it was Sir
Yeah.
that they went to, and Sheena was working, and just Brandy confronting her and accusing her. And so on, social media, you see this huge divide come up, people taking sides. Are they going to feel for Sheena? She's brand new, she's young, she seems naive and innocent. And then there's Brandy, who's already been on the show for a while. People have kind of already formed these opinions about her,
Mm,
and how much that is playing a part in what they decide.
yeah.
Yeah, so that was a big one for sure.
Yeah, I actually totally forgot about that. I have a friend that's recently like starting Beverly Hills,
Mm,
and she was at first had watched Vanderpump Rules and now watching Beverly Hills, like seeing Sheena has been really funny for her, and it kind of reminded me of that. But yeah, it's such a tricky situation like you're saying about like having a lot of context with one person and not so much with another, and how we can
Yeah.
really quickly put some people in a box if we don't have that relationship with them and that understanding about them. For
Yeah.
me, Brandy will always be in the wrong. But that's just me.
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. I remember actually she was probably one of the first housewives that you told me about.
I'm not
Um,
surprised.
yeah. And I don't think I've ever been a huge fan. I
Yeah.
just yeah, she just it just is a bit of a train wreck. I'm gonna
Yeah.
leave it for everyone to form their own opinions and watch.
Yeah.
But yeah. I'm just curious if it had come out later when we had seen a little bit more of Sheena and
Mhm.
her journey, like how that opinion might have changed a little bit. Because this is one that has continued to come up time and time again. It seems like Brandy always wants to bring it up, and like won't let people forget about it. So yeah, it's the fire that keeps on burning.
Yeah, for sure. And to me, like, side note, to me, it wasn't even cheating. It was that it like Sheena was just hooking up with her ex at that time. And I think he was probably being pretty deceitful of both of them on what each other's relationships were. So it just seems
Hmm.
like two women that were sort of pitted against each other from the beginning. And I don't think either of them
Yeah,
really did anything necessarily wrong. So that's always a weird like thing that we see. I think we see that a lot in Potomac as well. Just with the rumors. I find that the cast of Potomac will really be quick to sort of hold some women on one sort of accountability sword and another on a different one. It's really
yeah,
confusing. Yeah, because like you were sort of mentioning, there was rumors about Chris Bassett for a long time, and that really divided the group quite a bit for a long time. And as we
hmm,
can see from the footage behind you, like that clearly wasn't the case.
not happening.
Not happening here.
No, it's so true though. And like at that time, I mean, there were a lot of things coming up around him at his work,
Yeah.
and he was working at the restaurant. You know, I've worked at restaurants and bars, and you're there till like 3 a.m. and you're with
Yeah.
a whole bunch of people around your age who are, thirsty and hungry and everything in between. It's gonna come up, and I think the way they handled it was really good. That
Mhm.
it showed that you know, it's not going to ruffle their feathers, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes the reactions that we see in couples can really say a lot. I know we
Yeah.
talked about Eddie and Wendy and how they
Mhm.
had just kind of like laughed it off.
Yeah.
So, sometimes that's pretty telling as well.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And I think on the same cast, like having Ashley and Michael's, their reactions to allegations of infidelity or really
Yeah.
anything, if they've just not taken them well at all. Um, and we're seeing that a bit more now with Robin too. So I feel like that cast there's just been lots going on there, and it's really
Yeah.
interesting to see all the different ways of handling rumors. I
Yeah.
find that they take it the roughest.
Yeah, it's true. And part of me wonders, like, because I think this stuff with Michael was happening at that time that the
Yeah.
allegations started towards Chris,
Yeah.
like, people were on like a heightened awareness.
So true.
They had heightened suspicion, and I personally believe that that plays a part in how people react, whether it's online on social media or in these people's lives. um and for the viewers, it's like it makes you more suspicious, and it's going to make you think twice, like, could this happen to me? Who can I
Absolutely.
actually trust?
I remember that came up quite a bit actually on Real Housewives of Miami when everything was happening with Lisa last season with her now estranged husband, and just we've talked about that before on the show of how
Mhm.
awful that was to watch.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to see. I remember Gertie especially had like gone home to her husband and was like, are we good? And I remember I think also Martina and I forget her
Hmm.
name.
Julia.
Julia. Yeah, Julia was like, I really am like not meeting Martina where she needs me to be right now, and I
Mm,
don't want to have what happened with Lisa happen to me. So that's also an interesting way that we as viewers can sort of, as we're reacting to infidelity, we can see cast members also reacting to it live and how that sort of attributes to supporting their friend. And it's
yeah.
just a very interesting thing to watch.
Yeah, it's so true. And like our ability to empathize with those that we relate to or we see in a certain light? Like,
Hmm.
are there times that we maybe like overlook
Yeah.
other situations? Like one example, just going back to Vanderpump Rules, is Tom Schwartz and Katie
Hmm.
versus Tom Sandoval and Ariana.
Yeah.
He was like chronically cheating on Katie.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely guilty of like not giving that as much I don't know, as much of a platform and as much credibility as Tom and Ariana's situation, just
Yeah.
based on my feelings towards Katie. And
Totally.
I know I'm not the only person who's done that,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, no, that's actually such a good point. I think like having context really matters in these scenarios because I'm thinking of somebody if they were to just start tuning into Real Housewives of Potomac now, not having the context of Juan and Robin's relationship even, they'd probably be like, Robin just really trusts her husband. Why are these women so pressed about it? And it's
yeah,
like, this is so complicated and there's so much to it. But that's so
yeah.
true, like how our personal opinions can really influence the validity and where we kind of
Hmm.
stand on it by default, and then really
Yeah.
need to be proven otherwise to sort of see the other side.
Yeah, it's so true. I think also because of like how big the Sandoval thing
Yeah.
was, it just made people really forget and kind of
Yeah.
overlook that. It was interesting too, like I was watching Winter House and Tom Schwartz was on it for a little bit, and people just again didn't have that context like you're talking about, and
Yeah.
so they give him this like free pass and he's such a good guy and oh you should go for him, and it's just interesting. And it's not that people who cheat don't deserve second chances or that they
Yeah.
can't change. Of course they can, um, at least in my opinion. But yeah, it's interesting what we like attribute to those people based on what's happened in the past.
Yeah, it's so true. And I remember when Katie was asked a question at BravoCon about it, her response was that the woman that was interested in Schwartz clearly hadn't seen Vanderpump Rules before. And I thought that that was such a great way for her to address that. Because it's true. I think if anybody were to watch the show, they would sort of come to conclusions about him, and not necessarily put him into a box, like you're saying, like hold space for there to be change, but
Yeah.
maybe also just proceed with a little bit of caution, or maybe just ask certain kind of questions or like follow up
Yeah.
on the growth. Because that's what I would do personally if I were in that scenario, having watched Vanderpump Rules. So
100%. I mean, there is a reality. Like, we all have different ideas about
yeah,
cheating. We all even have different definitions of
yeah,
what
that's so
cheating is
true.
or isn't,
Yeah,
and where those limits are, and what is or isn't okay.
yeah,
And, for some of us, if we were going to be with someone who maybe has stepped out in their relationship in the past, we would want to know and,
yeah.
be able to decide, do I want to opt in?
Hmm.
And do I want to potentially take that risk or, proceed with a little bit more caution right now, like you said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is such a good point. I feel like a trend that I see quite often on the show, and this has come up a little bit in Real Housewives of Miami that we've talked about, is there, in terms, it just sparked my memory when you were saying definitions of cheating. We do see a lot of times, like women, when they go on vacations, they tend to make out with other women, and that's not really seen as being cheating. And again, like there's different definitions of that for every single relationship, but I find it interesting that across the board, that's not really something that's addressed. And I'm even
Yeah.
thinking of Mia in Real Housewives of Potomac with her friendship from last season. Her and her friend
Yeah.
were like showering together and they've talked about hooking up in the past and like
Hmm.
just incredibly intimate. And it was interesting to me, at least from what I can remember, that no other like I remember other castmates thought that it was strange, but they didn't really classify that as cheating. And there wasn't this like, does Gordon know about this? Like that wasn't really asked. It was more like
Hmm.
what's going on between you guys? And I think it was more coming from a place of like, ooh, this is scandalous, not
Yeah.
and exciting. It wasn't,
Yeah.
yeah, it was weird. It was such a strange thing to watch. Like I think especially being a queer woman, I was like, uh like this is and by my definition cheating, but
Hmm.
okay, I guess we're just not gonna call it that. I don't know. It was
Yeah.
weird.
And I mean, I think we talked about in the episode on the house husbands, like
Mhm.
there was definitely some weird vibes and some weird energy going on in their relationship, the way that they would like play these little games with other people.
Yeah.
And it definitely was this kind of blurred line where, and it's not like we need to necessarily that we're entitled to know all the
Hmm.
details of their relationship, but it's
Yeah.
also like you've put this out there
Yeah.
and you're clearly trying to give a certain impression.
Hmm.
And so there's, there's a lot around that, but you're right, the way that we maybe overlook those instances
Hmm.
or don't give them the same platform. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, it's a complicated one. It really shows how our lives are very intersected with many, many things. And I think like you were saying, it really does bring forward questions about how much do people need to share or how much are we entitled to know as audiences?
Yeah.
And this blurred line between, like you said, them putting out information and us having questions about that. And
Yeah.
do we have the right to sort of know? I don't know. It's a confusing thing. I
Yeah.
think with those, I think some clarity, even just a quick like, Gordon's fine with this would have been cool. Just to sort
Yeah.
of, I think also like address the fact that this behavior is crossing a line. I think it's when it's not being totally talked about and it's kind of like, oh yeah, we just do this and this is just what we do. And people are like, what?
Yeah.
What do you mean you
Yeah.
do that with your friend?
I
Um,
know. Then there's also the flip side of when partners are really vocal
mm,
about, clear lines. And I think on one of the latest episodes of Miami, um, was it Alexia was talking about Todd, like, not giving her permission to like share a bed with anyone other than Marisol. So, so, did you
yeah.
see that one?
No, I haven't seen the most recent episode. I'm a little behind.
Yeah, that's okay. They were just talking about sharing beds,
Mm,
and I think it was Julia who was,
mm,
talking about wanting to share a room with Alexia and looking forward to bonding that way and having that moment. And she kind of like shrugged it off. And you do wonder too, because she's a queer woman, if
hmm.
there's a question there. And I think she brought that up as well. But sometimes the husbands are really vocal or the partners are really
Yeah.
vocal that way that, this is a line that you can't cross.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
some are more traditional, I
Yeah.
guess.
Turns out. I think we see that a lot more in Miami than we do in other ones. I know we've talked about that as well. It's
Yeah.
interesting to sort of see that be impacted culturally too, and the impact that it has on audiences. Like it's just super interesting. There's a lot more
Hmm.
audience that could be like, whatever, cool, it's totally fine, and others that are like, you know, don't share a bed with her.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
interesting stuff.
It's true.
I'm wondering too, like just sort of talking about the impact that these narratives have on audiences and sort of what we think about cheating. For me, let me try to like organize my thoughts on this. For
Yeah.
me, when I think of like infidelity and we watch it on reality TV, I think it's kind of a double-edged sword a little bit, because we have people who really see themselves on screen and they can say, I totally resonate with that. I feel her pain, I feel their pain, I feel his pain, and I feel empathy for that and I feel seen and I feel heard. And I think that that's a great impact. But then I also do see this like black and white thinking as well. This like once a cheater, always a cheater thing.
Yeah.
This also like um this person's now automatically in this box and shouldn't be treated with like empathy or just sort of basic respect. And that's sort of a difficult thing to sort of wrap around as well. I think that we aren't quite ready in reality TV to have those types of conversations. I think hopping on the hate bandwagon is kind of the way that a lot of people feel because they feel very wronged by what's happened with them personally and resonate with that on screen. And it's
Hmm.
just, it almost feels like something that you can't quite talk about. And I
Mm.
know that people who are on Sandoval's like side of things with the whole thing, like they were completely like bullied, like just by even making a comment to say like,
Yeah.
he seems really upset right now. People are like, well, you're a fucking idiot. Like they would
Yeah.
just completely explode. And like I get it, but I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Hmm. I mean, I think that people have a right to feel however they feel.
Period.
But like, I definitely had a lot of anger and
Mhm.
resentment towards him, but I also feel like I like watched the buildup of him just being shitty.
Yeah, yeah.
um But I think when you're on social media, it's definitely a different ball game to like go and spew hateful comments towards other people for their opinions. And we kind of have to take a step back and remember like this is their lives, and like the damage that's been done, or the impact has already happened and is ongoing for them, but like that's completely separate than the impact on us to some
Yeah,
degree. Like,
totally.
being able to really like take a step back and say like, why is this coming up for me,
Mhm.
and like why am I feeling so attached and so impacted by this.
Yeah.
And Scandival was probably like the most, I don't know, groundbreaking
Yeah.
cheating scandal that's ever happened on reality TV.
Yeah.
There was a humongous divide
Hmm.
created out of that. Um, and, we've heard stories of people like going and trying to like jump Tom Sandoval and like going to his like boycotting his business and like trying to like attack him at different events and stuff. And so, I do think definitely these things can go too far
Hmm.
based out of the narrative that's carried through online. And so we do have to be really careful about that stuff.
Yeah. No, I think that's such an eloquent way of putting it. And I think it is important to have conversations about what comes up for us in these sort of things, like we talked about at the beginning of the episode, like just checking in with ourselves because it can be really difficult. And even like seeing friends go through something similar to that, it can be triggering to be a support person for somebody who's gone through that. So when that happened with Ariana, I remember being like, girl, get the fuck out of there. Like I just like
Yeah.
less for me, but more as like somebody that I feel like I've connected with over watching her grow through the
Yeah.
show. I just like wanted the best for her, and it was just so upsetting to see that happen to her. And I just think that we can all sort of take this on differently depending on roles that we've played in our own lives and people that we care about. And
Yeah.
I think it was I remember, I forget where I saw this, but there was some sort of like conversation about validating fans' feelings about this. Like, we have, like, don't let it be undermined that we've been part of these people's lives for a long time. And I think that we have been in their lives too. Like, they've
Mm-hmm.
seen us watch and support and love them from afar. And to be hurt by that, I think is
Mm-hmm.
fair. And it's not, I think, something that's taken very seriously. But I mean, for me, I don't go to bed like like I don't know these people deep down, but I do feel like it is validating to be like, we do spend a lot of our time investing in these stories and in these people, and so when something happens, it's okay that we feel some type of way about it. But again, like taking a moment to think about how it's impacting us and what's bringing it up for us outside of the shows
Yeah.
off screen.
It's That's so true. That's such a good point. And like, I think one of the things too is we are so part of their day to day. At
Hmm.
least that's how it appears.
Yeah.
And think about like when you go to camp for a week, like you leave and you have best friends with someone because you spent 24/7 together. Like we get attached to people really quickly
Yeah.
when we're part of their day to day.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really good point that like we do have this level of investment.
Totally.
Um, and I think it just rocks your world, especially with Scandival,
Hmm.
where, there weren't really a lot of signs that came out on the show, like production didn't even really know.
Yeah.
And I think it is part just the shock. Like, could my partner deceive me that way? Could my
Totally.
partner lie to me on multiple instances
Yeah.
over, multiple months?
Yeah.
Like, it just it was just this like haunting, shocking thing of like,
Hmm.
could that be me? Or like you said, if you have known someone, or if you have had that experience of being lied to that way, it cuts deeply.
Hmm. Yeah.
Right. And I think we can't ask people not to be emotionally invested.
100%.
um, but we also have to remember that, this is someone's life too. And I think we heard Ariana say that like quite a few times, this is my life. Like, this happened
Mhm.
to me. Don't forget, this isn't just like some storyline,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and I so appreciated her doing that. And I was just thinking about when at the season 10 reunion, when she was saying that like her fans and people got her through that time, I think that that was also another indication that like messaging positivity and showing up for people, regardless if we know them personally, but just showing our solidarity with something that we feel is right, has does impact her. Like she did not see her way through that and was able by her own strength and resiliency, but also, like she said, by receiving positive messaging from people that watched the show, that she was completely entitled to feel how she felt. I think that that is really, really powerful. And, we are human beings, and like reality TV came out of it, like where we're at in our evolution as humans. But I'm thinking of like hundreds of years ago, like we would be seeing somebody in pain and feel empathy. And it's only in this sort of like generation that we experience that, but we don't know these people really. So we need to sort of like have space for how we feel when we're connecting with somebody, just as like an empathetic person, while also knowing that like these are their lives and we can sort of like put our stuff at the door because we don't, thank God, have to deal with that. Like when I hear of Ariana still being in the mix of her house and like legal problems with him, like
Yeah.
she's still very much in the thick of it. And like I just can't even imagine how that must still feel for her to be like living in the same house as him and sort of having to coordinate who's where. Like it's just horrible.
It's a nightmare. It's
Yeah,
an absolute
truly a
nightmare. And
nightmare.
these situations are extremely emotional and they can get hostile really quickly.
Yeah.
And another example we're seeing play out right now is Lisa and Lenny.
Mm.
And unfortunately there were things caught on camera that he
Ugh.
was saying, and he's just, I'll say it, he's a scumbag, like
Yeah, dirt. Dirt.
literal dirt. But we heard him kind of we'll say it, yeah, louder for the people in the back. um he had that hot mic moment where he was
Ugh.
talking about the person he feels like he's cheating on with his current wife. I don't want to share a bed with my wife because it would be cheating on my the person I really love.
Like how bizarre, but like
Yeah,
just fucking like how do you have that in your brain and then just share it with
I
somebody?
know.
And he's
He
like,
was
"Oh yeah."
whispering. He was
Oh.
whispering.
Like imagine being on the receiving end of that and just being like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" Respectfully.
I know. Production's like behind him, like,
Turn it up.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's, yeah. I mean, sometimes I feel like I'm just scratching my head in some of these scenarios because I'm like, you don't even like your partner. You think that the grass is greener on the other side, and you don't want to be with this person. Like,
Yeah.
why would you torture yourself?
Yeah.
Like, clearly you don't have the ability to empathize with your partner at that time or possibly ever. But like, why would you choose to torture yourself and stay with someone that you don't even like? Just
If yeah. Yeah, no, if anybody takes anything away from this podcast, let it be that if you don't like your relationship and you don't want to be with them and you're having thoughts of cheating on them, just get out. Like it
yeah.
saves so much pain and heartbreak and betrayal and insecurity. Just
Yeah.
get out. It's not
It's
worth
it's
it.
cruel. It's cruel.
It's just cruel. And I think like that's why people, like you said, really resonated with Sandoval. I think the Lisa and Lenny thing, like it's just been very, very messy. It's just yeah, like it's just so painful to see it sort of be drawn out. And I
Yeah.
think it does create a lot of insecurity in people watching. And I'm curious to sort of hear your thoughts on that. Um, and I think as we're entering into season 11 of Vanderpump Rules, especially, I'm curious to see how like audiences are gonna continue to relate with Ariana and if that um sort of like suspicion stuff is gonna keep going. But I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that I think is important to say is like when cheating happens in a relationship, people are not at their best in their
No,
relationship.
no.
Like things are not going well, and then you decide to cheat.
Yeah.
Like that's not what's happening,
Hmm.
right? And so I think that um someone who's been in that scenario is naturally going to think about all the things that were happening, all the things that they didn't do,
Mhm.
you know, all the times that I wasn't pulling my weight or wasn't at my best, or, you know, oh, I should have made more effort. I should have, you know, showered more. I should have done my hair more. I should have, whatever. Like all those questions come up, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Shower more.
no, literally
No,
though,
I
like
know, I know.
especially like for all the moms, right? Like you're
Yeah.
raising kids and like how many times have we heard of scenarios where cheating happens when they're pregnant or when they've just had their first kid? Like it's fucked. But
Yeah.
this isn't happening when people are at their strongest and at their best with each other.
Yeah.
And so it's never an excuse. It's never a justification because that's not how you end a relationship. That's not how you communicate something that, you know, needs to be addressed in your relationship.
Yeah.
Um but I think naturally people are going to revisit any insecurities that maybe they've struggled with in the past, or
Mhm.
it's like reopening old wounds or
Absolutely.
maybe new insecurities, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think like another reason why Sandoval hit women especially so hard was I think just like you were saying, it's really haunting to watch it back and to know that there were things happening behind the scenes. And she's sort of been really open about what was really going on in their relationship and that it wasn't like they were great and then he was doing this really awful thing. And I mean, it did blindside her, but they were having conversations about their relationship ending and it was just really complicated. But I mean, he also like gaslit the shit out of her into like thinking that she was somehow accountable for what had happened. And so I think like when you're rewatching things back, knowing the truth, women are watching that over saying like, "Oh, did you see the way that he looked at her? Did you see the way that, Rachel was wearing that necklace?" Like it was I think it's like continuing to unfortunately build the same like paranoia that I've seen a lot on earlier seasons of Call Her Daddy, the podcast. I know now it's a really widely known one. It's really popular. When I first started listening to it back when it was the host Alex Cooper and Sophia, they talked a lot about like ways to catch your partner cheating, ways to get
Mm-hmm.
into Google Drives, ways to go into Facebook Messenger to like make sure everything's good, like just very like your own sort of investigator thing.
Wow.
And I had to stop listening to that for a long time because it was just really upsetting to hear this
Yeah.
like fear that these women had in their relationships and the things that they did to like avoid feeling hurt when really they should have just like not been in relationships and just healed whatever was going on. But I think like that sort of started creeping back up when everything with Ariana and Tom sort of unfolded because we can see it now. And so there's this like, how did I not see this earlier thing? That's
Yeah.
really unfortunate and sad that that comes up for women, especially, I think.
Yeah. I think that's very true that like there's a lot of self blame
Yeah.
and you feel like the trust you had with yourself is broken because
Yeah.
it's like I can't trust my own judgment to
Yeah.
pick a partner that I can depend on who
So
isn't going to
true.
hurt me. Like
Yep.
in a really twisted way, I think sometimes the narrative is that like you do it to yourself, you're to blame and
Yeah.
you're somehow responsible, which we're not. Like we can never be responsible for someone else's behavior.
Yeah.
And usually cheating is like to me when I think about cheating, we can talk about like specific scenarios and it's
Mhm.
over clothes on, whatever. To me, it's yeah, I know. I know
Ah!
everyone has such a different line with it, right?
Yeah.
But to me, it involves secrets.
Mm.
It's you've kept a secret. You're keeping something from me,
Yeah.
and it usually involves sneaking around, some kind of lying, some kind of manipulating or gaslighting, like you said. I think like some of the work is just being able to forgive yourself and come
Yeah.
to terms with like what just happened.
Hmm.
Um and it's hard too because some of those scenarios where you're like trying to catch your partner cheating, sometimes they are cheating
Hmm.
and sometimes you do catch them because it does happen
Yeah.
and that's shitty.
Yeah.
But at the same time, sometimes when we bring our insecurities from past hurt into a relationship, our behavior can come out as like controlling, and just kind of not nice. And
Yeah.
so sometimes those behaviors end up being something that can push our partner away,
Yeah, totally.
right?
Yeah.
Still, if they make that choice, that is their choice. It's not our fault, but there is a whole story. Um, but yeah, just I don't know. It's so complicated, eh?
Yeah, and I think we can even see that too happening with Juan and Robin right now unfolding because I think it's so easy from us on the outside to be like, "Girl, like
Yeah.
look at what's happening. He's being foolish at the very least, let alone
Yeah.
like cheating for me is a very real possibility." But um yeah, it's like it's tricky because there are some people like Robin who are just fully leaning into this like trust mode
Yeah.
and are just completely taking everything at face value. And we want to see her maybe doing a little bit more investigating. But then also that's like not healthy. So
Yeah.
it's so tricky as audiences to, because again, like we don't know what happens behind closed doors. We don't know the conversations that they're really having. What's relayed
Yeah.
to us, we can feel something about, but
Yeah.
we really, really, really don't know. So it's
It's
complicated.
true. It's true. And like, if I have to constantly be questioning if my partner's cheating on me, or constantly be worrying, or feel like I always have
Yeah.
to check their phone, or I have to like smell their shirt when they come home, and like right? Like if there's certain things that I have to do to feel like I'm managing my trust in my partner, like
Yeah.
we've got bigger problems,
Totally. 100%.
right?
Yep.
And I think one of the things too around cheating with like reality TV in particular is like cheating is usually about opportunity.
Yeah.
Like you have the opportunity to do it. You have the opportunity to be tempted.
Hmm.
And on one hand, we don't necessarily know how much production is playing into those scenarios,
Yep.
how much they tempt people. Like one example is Love Island, Temptation Island, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, obviously the relationships are much more short term. But we have to ask that question, like, how much is production playing a part in this?
Yeah.
Um, but usually people just get like a fantasy in their mind. They think that it's going to be this, great, wonderful thing. I think about Lenny and Lisa, where he convinced himself that Lisa was this like annoying person that he didn't like anymore. Okay, again, if you didn't want to be with someone, then you don't have to. You're an adult and you actually
Yep.
get to choose. Um, but part of me thinks it's only going to be a matter of time before he realizes, hey, the person I picked, they also have flaws. They also have, wants. They want kids, or they want this or that, and so usually it's just this fantasy, and in time that bubble is going to be burst.
Yes, and also like I think production can also create opportunity for the lies to continue too, right? Like because I remember with Rachel and Tom, they had all these conversations, but okay, let's wait until filming wraps.
Yeah.
Lenny sort of like whispering things like off camera, on camera, hot mic moment. Um And so it's interesting how like the timing of filming can really impact people's personal timelines on how honest they are. Which again like kind of ties into conversations we've had in the past about like things being really authentic and real. It's really unfortunate that things had unfolded the way they did for Lisa because that was on season. I am sort of glad in some way for Ariana that it didn't happen while they were filming, although they did pick up cameras. I think that was by choice and with consent. I
Yeah.
could see how that would be complicated in the middle of filming. Like if they were filming that show for the
I
like
know.
the concert for the show and that were to be caught on camera, that would have been absolutely brutal and I think completely exploitative of Ariana's trauma because I'm sure that was totally traumatic for her to sort of witness that. So if that were to be on
Yeah.
camera, that would be really difficult. So I'm just sort of thinking out loud of the ways that production impacts timelines of the lies, but also
Yeah.
the opportunities too.
It's so true. And like, there's things that we probably have never seen that have gone on, and, to give
Yeah,
some of that context that we might have otherwise. So we always have to like kind of take a step back and ask ourselves that question, like,
totally,
could there be things that I'm missing here?
for sure.
Um, but yeah, there's been a lot of tumultuous kind of ways that we've seen this play out.
Yeah.
there have been a couple of examples where we've seen couples try to really work on things.
Hmm.
And I think we can really appreciate that honesty and that vulnerability when we see it. It
Definitely.
doesn't happen very often, but I hope we do start to see more of that, because you can imagine that, people who are on reality TV and, they're surrounded by people who are constantly in their DMs and coming up to them, and right, like you'd think that there would be more of a degree of temptation.
Yeah.
um, so I hope we start to see more like open, vulnerable conversations. I know we
Hmm.
saw Jennifer Aiden and Bill,
Hmm.
they went to therapy. I know they didn't necessarily share their story on their own choice, but um, they kind of confronted it head on together and
Yeah.
let people into the therapy room.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I didn't even think to really dive into that much last week's episode with Caitlin.
Yeah,
I think
I
we
didn't
may,
either.
yeah, I don't know. That just came to mind because that was a very uncomfortable therapy session that we bared witness to on the show. But yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it is good to see that vulnerability. I also think it's good the more that we see couples just completely laugh at allegations of rumors, because like you said, there are a lot more opportunities when you are sort of in the spotlight.
Yeah.
I think people can a lot of times become targets too. So if we're seeing this a lot of rumors about Juan going on, I think that there would be a lot more opportunity for people to just sort of make storylines or like just shoot their shot and see how that goes. So I think having more couples that are just like not letting that sort of dictate the narrative of their own relationship, that they can sort of like create their own story and they can take ownership of what their relationship looks like Wendy and Happy Eddie did.
Yeah.
I think that that's really healthy to see, because I also just like, as much as I love reality TV, and sometimes when I see these dramas unfold, it's entertaining, it's enticing, it's everything that production wants it to be. I'm personally getting exhausted by the storyline.
Yeah.
I'm finding it to be um, really upsetting to see women just constantly be on each other through men's bad decisions.
Yeah.
Like just to see the tension between Robin and the rest of the group on Real Housewives of Potomac this season is really bothering me.
Yeah.
And I just like wish it didn't have more as much airtime as it currently has. So I think the more that we can sort of like shy away from that as much as we can, like obviously these things are happening, but just like any sort of person sliding into your DM saying like, "Oh, I saw Chris last night at 1 a.m." Like Chris Bassett's at 1 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that's not necessarily drama that needs to be part of this show, you know? It's
Yeah.
just not worth it.
Yeah. It's so true. And I think that's where, again, like production has such a big part in
Yeah.
that whole storyline, but also people online. Like there are literal groups and accounts that are dedicated to exposing people and finding evidence. And
Yeah.
we all know, like, if you look for something, you can find it and you can create
Absolutely.
a narrative and create a story out of almost anything.
Yeah, for sure.
So, sometimes we're just on a mission to prove something and we create that scenario in our own minds.
Yeah, so true.
Um, but yeah, I think it's definitely interesting the kind of dialogue around these couples. And that's such a good point that, typically when it's a man cheating on his female partner,
Hmm.
there is a lot more spotlight on the women
Hmm.
and how they react and what they did or what they didn't do, and were you
Yeah.
having sex enough, or were were you
Ugh.
like putting in your effort, or
Yeah.
there's just this way that we tend to point the finger and kind of let the men have more of a free pass, right?
Yeah, totally. And like I've said before, and I'll say it again, like this is Real Housewives. I'm I'm just don't love having like husbands be as involved as they have been the most recent seasons of
Yeah.
Real Huswives kind of across the board, and like having marital problems, I don't have a problem with. If Bravo's listening, it's marital problems I don't necessarily have as much of a problem with, because I like the vulnerability and I like having those conversations amongst women and sort of like hearing how things are going for them. But it's just more like, yeah, when men get involved in this way though, where they're not fully immersed in it. So like the Giselle and Ashley aren't having conversations with Juan Dixon. They're having it with Robin. And like that to me is just so unfair to Robin to be put in that position to be constantly defending him. And I think that again, like we've said in the past, I think that they handled it the best way they could as friends to her to offer her support and to validate her. But
Yeah.
it's like I wish that if his storyline and if he's going to be on camera is this part of the show, I think they should be able to talk to him and address him directly. So it's just I don't know. It's just been weird, but
I know. I completely agree. I know you haven't seen Summer House yet, but I
go for
definitely
it.
recommend it. There's a really good example of, cheating playing out. One of the main couples, it's not really a secret, but Kyle and Amanda, kind of starting off similarly to Juan and Robin
Mm,
at Potomac, but just lots of cheating in the beginning of their relationship. And they've been together for years, I think like 8 years, and they're
mm,
married now, and they've like totally worked through it. It's in the past, and um, I felt like people really championed Amanda, and they were really trying to hold Kyle accountable and really call him out. And
mm,
so that was kind of nice to see too, because we definitely don't see that, especially in the Real Housewives franchise. But it was just a really good kind of example worth mentioning.
yeah, that is a good example. Yeah. I think it's good whenever we do see that change because more often not like Dr. Honda talked about when he was reacting to Vanderpump Rules, like a lot of times couples do stay together. It's more on average
Yeah.
than not that they try at least to work it out. So I think having a little bit more of that being the norm than the opposite of it, them probably breaking up and it being really tumultuous and like a whole friend group is divided. Like that's not always what happens. It's
Yeah.
normally that a couple tries everything they can to stay together. And
Yeah.
I think especially when there is some manipulation going on and some gaslighting, like I would totally understand why Ariana would have stayed in the relationship with Tom, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But just given the way that he was sort of making her responsible for a lot of things, I can see why a lot of people would stay in that dynamic because they feel badly
Yeah.
for having caused that problem. So, and
Mm.
that's kind of how I see Juan and Robin. It's just like a really, and it's just been handled so unfortunately.
Yeah. No, it's so true. That's such a good point. And I think that's the thing that really sets these scenarios apart for me personally is
Mhm.
like the way that you handle it, the way that you step into accountability
Yeah.
versus like what other behaviors are going on, like the manipulative behavior, the gaslighting, the bullying,
Yeah.
um, just, blaming them and just being otherwise emotionally abusive. Like
Mhm.
those are definitely very different scenarios. So it's not that all cheating is the same or we want to put
Yeah,
people into the same category because I think that usually there's bigger context and other things that we've seen along with that when there's deterioration. But,
for sure.
we can imagine that a lot of the couples that we see, they have gone through something similar and have
Mhm.
worked through it and
Yeah.
have come out stronger. So,
I'm really curious to see how things with Kyle and Mauricio, continue to unfold both on the show and off the show. As of where things are standing right now, just in terms of like next steps, the way that my sense of it is that they are very much with other people at this point. I see Kyle and Robin, I mean, not Kyle and Robin, oh my God. Kyle and Morgan as being definitely a couple. And
mm,
my heart really hurts for her right now watching the show and seeing how upset she's been. And I'm really proud of her for making decisions around sobriety and for focusing on her wellness. I think that that is a positive thing. And it's really unfortunate to see other people sort of like hate on her for that. So I hope that sort of the work that she's doing, what we're seeing right now, even though that's been in the past for her, kind of like leads her to a point of, you know, accepting herself, accepting the situation with her ex potentially, and maybe leaning into this new relationship that's hopefully really positive for her. But definitely curious to see how that unfolds. Do you think that they're a couple or no? What are your thoughts on it?
I'm not 100% convinced right
Mhm.
now, but I do think it's a possibility. I
Yeah.
definitely see a lot of connection and closeness and like emotional intimacy between them.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely feel like they support each other, and like I could see it.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that friendships can be like that too.
True. Yeah.
So I think we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
It's a possibility, but I
Yeah.
love the one thing that Kyle said when she was talking to Mo in one of the first episodes is like, I'm so clear right now.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I'm like, And we heard Kathy recently say, I mean, I wouldn't normally put like a ton of stock in what Kathy says, but I stand by this. She was saying that she knows that Kyle wouldn't
Mm,
be separating or doing anything if she hadn't really thought it through.
yeah.
And I 100% believe that.
Yeah. Me too.
So I kind of feel like whatever Kyle's doing right now, whoever she's spending her time with, it's good for her.
Yeah.
And it's something really tied to who she actually is at her core and what matters to her. So I
Oh,
love to see it. I'll love to see where this goes.
so well said, so well put. That's exactly how I feel too. I'm just like so glad to see her in the spot of choosing her, and it's not for Mo to decide,
Yeah, no,
which I
you don't
love.
have a choice.
You have a choice, which I love.
Yes, we love to see our Capricorn queen
Yeah.
living in her values.
But I also do think like, some of the things that she's been feeling with her friend group lately, particularly with Sutton and Garcelle. I
Yeah,
think that happens when somebody's like growing into a different phase of their life, and that's what really makes me see this whatever's happening between her and her husband right now in the show to be really valid, and there's a lot of weight to it because it like
yeah,
all parts of your life shift when you make a huge change like that or when you're
yeah,
preparing for it. And so I think it's been nice to sort of see, as difficult as it is for her in the moment on the show right now, it is good as a viewer to be like, okay, she's stepping into this like change. And it's just
yeah.
after so many seasons of her being on, like, it's just, I feel like as another Capricorn woman, I really feel like I know her at this point. I'm just so happy that she's stepping into this phase of her life. So it's
I
gonna be good.
know. I love to see it. I'm so happy to be on this journey and can't wait to see what's next for her.
Thanks for having us, Kyle.
Oh, we love her.
So, also for Vanderpump Rules, like I've mentioned many times on this episode, season 11 is coming at the end of January. And I was saying to Abby before we start recording too that there's been some sort of rumblings on Instagram so far. There's some clips. I don't think they're necessarily leaked. I think just more detailed footage is starting to come out as little spoilers. Um, Coming from Lala, saying some
Mm-hmm.
things about Ariana, kind of more alluding to that she's been treated differently based off of her being cheated on, and sort of being treated like a god is the way that she put it. And I've been thinking a lot about that as I was showering tonight. I was washing my hair and thinking about how Lala was treated very differently in her cheating scenario versus Ariana. And I can imagine that would cause some tension between
Mm-hmm.
them. Maybe a bit misplaced, obviously. I don't think Ariana's responsible for what happened with Lala. I think Ariana was really supportive of Lala when that was happening for her
Yeah.
in Ocean. But we also do now know by Schwartz's confirmation that he and Sheena at one point did make out. We don't know when that happened exactly, but we know that it has happened. So I'm curious to see how that plays out too. There's just a lot of question marks still.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And like, I'm not 100% shocked to hear that about Sheena
No.
and Tom. I feel like that kind of explains a few things.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, obviously the big question is like, how will people feel about Ariana versus Tom?
Yeah.
And where will people show their like loyalties? And that's already been a big thing is like with Sheena and Lala and where they stand on that friendship.
Yeah.
There's definitely a lot of mixed messages happening, like Sheena going back to Tom Sandoval's room at BravoCon.
Yeah.
But then Sheena and Lala also dissed um, Rachel in a new song that they released about her being a cheater.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but like cheating has just been such a big part of this show, Vanderpump Rules. Like pretty much everyone has done it
Yeah.
at some point. There's just been so many lines crossed that it's almost like we have to just kind of judge like what was the worst or what was worse or less bad. Like, so
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it gets really murky and it gets really tricky.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'm really curious to hear how the dynamics play out because Ariana actually tweeted or responded to someone's comment or something about like people kind of turning their loyalty to Tom
Yeah.
Sandoval and against her, and she was kind of like, yeah, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if that happened. So
Mhm.
I think there's going to be some really interesting dynamics this season.
I think all of us sort of are a bit on the edge of our seats just because we did not expect last season to go how it happened. So I also think that production is stepping into a pretty intense season because they kind of have to like keep up from last season. Like they kind of sort of have to keep the momentum going and they have to really make sure that they're bringing the drama
Yeah.
just like last season did without, completely ruining people's lives.
Yep.
So I'm curious to see how that goes, but I'm curious if Ariana is making that comment coming from a place of like people from the group ended up getting more empathy for him. So I wouldn't be surprised if other people did, or if there's like information that we don't have.
I know.
So but like you said, I would think it would have to take a lot for me to like feel differently about the situation. I think a lot of people would need to be given like a lot new information to feel differently.
Yeah.
So I sort of doubt that I would change my thought on it,
Yeah.
but
I don't see that happening for me.
yeah, me neither. We'll see. But
Time will tell, I guess.
yeah, and I know that Jax is back. I don't know if he's like a permanent cast member. It doesn't seem like it from the pictures that have come out, but he is on the season. He does
Right.
appear.
Yeah, he's
So
been our chronic cheater
I was
on the
gonna
show.
say like cheater pumpkin eater is back.
My goodness.
Curious what his appearance is like. Probably not giving us a whole lot of good influence, but we'll see.
Yeah. Oh man, it's definitely gonna be explosive, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's gonna be so
So
good. It's literally the best gift,
that's
birthday
gonna be
gift
the
I could
best
get.
day.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for this conversation. Love to hear people's thoughts on it. I know it's a pretty big topic, and like we said, people feel very passionately about it on whatever spectrum or side that you
Yeah.
feel you're on. But yeah, thanks so much for joining, and until next time.
Yes. Tune into our holiday episode next week.
Woo!
So excited.
Ho ho ho.
Bunch of hoes.
Bunch of hoes.